Good evening, I'm Amirul Aiman. Tonight's top stories: Donald Trump takes an indirect role in high-stakes talks with Iran as Tehran launches military drills in the Strait of Hormuz, raising tensions in the region. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. US President Donald Trump says he will be indirectly involved in high-stakes nuclear talks between the United States and Iran, which begins today in Geneva. He describes the meeting as significant and suggesting that Tehran now appears open to reaching an agreement.
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. But typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
As diplomatic efforts resume, military preparations are also intensifying. The United States has deployed a second aircraft carrier to the region, signaling readiness for a potential escalation. American officials said the military is preparing for a sustained campaign should the negotiations fail.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps begins military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz, just as renewed nuclear talks with the United States begins in Geneva. The drills come amid a significant buildup of American naval forces in the region, adding to already heightened tensions.
State television reports that the exercises are intended to prepare for potential security threats. They were launched from Abu Musa Island with a focus on improving rapid response and strengthening defensive capabilities. Missile systems deployed on the island are said to have a range of up to 1,000 kilometers, extending well beyond the strategic waterway. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the world's most critical shipping routes, carrying roughly a quarter of global seaborne oil and around a fifth of liquefied natural gas, according to the International Energy Agency. Although Iranian hardliners have repeatedly threatened to close the strait during periods of heightened tension, the passage has never been blocked.
That's the headline for tonight. We'll be right back after the break.
Orang anak aku mati, Azri. Kau ingat aku masih boleh hidup dengan kau ke? Bahagia ke awak hidup atas derita anak-anak?
Sampai bila awak nak jalankan tanggungjawab pada seorang isteri yang cacat ni?
Apa janji? Kalau Lia tak bahagia, tak bakal izinkan Lia pergi.
Mama akan buat apa saja untuk anak-anak, asalkan anak-anak Mama bahagia.
Aku cabar kau, Lia. Kalau kau hebat, kau hidup tak payah bergantung dengan suami kau.
Sanggup ke dia nak hadap kau ni sampai mati?
Berapa cadang nak bagi Ril handle satu projek besar yang kita baru dapat? Wah, Ril handle projek ni dengan Rin. Ha?
Projek tu tak boleh jalan ke kalau Rin tak kerja dengan Rin tu?
Kalau Lia yang jadi penghalangnya, aku nak kau ceraikan Lia.
Rin sanggup bermadu kalau Abang Rin sudi terima Rin.
Aku setuju jadi madu kau. Tapi ada syarat. Bayar aku 1 juta, aku jadi madu kau.
Andai itu takdirnya dua, Isnin hingga Khamis di Astro dan Astro Go.
Welcome back. The third round of trilateral talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States is underway in Geneva. US President Donald Trump says the talks should be very easy, urging Kyiv to enter negotiations without delay. Two earlier US-mediated rounds in Abu Dhabi were described by both sides as constructive but produced no breakthrough. Territory remains a major sticking point, with Moscow demanding Ukraine to cede the entire Donbas region, a term Kyiv rejects as amounting to surrender. Meanwhile, fighting continues, with Russia said it launched a massive strike on Ukrainian military and energy facilities. Ukraine also reported hundreds of drones missiles fired overnight at multiple targets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said intelligence shows Moscow is preparing further large-scale attacks on energy infrastructure. US President Donald Trump says he will soon decide whether to approve additional weapons sales to Taiwan. His remarks follow a warning from Chinese President Xi Jinping against further American arms transfer to the island.
Military support for Taiwan has been a key sticking point between Washington and Beijing ahead of a planned leaders' summit in China this April. During a call with Trump on February 4th, Xi urged caution over arms sales to Taiwan and called for mutual respect in managing bilateral ties. Though Washington has no formal diplomatic ties with Taipei, it is bound by law to provide it with the means to defend itself. In December, Taipei said Washington approved $11 billion in arms sales. Shortly afterwards, China conducted large-scale military exercises simulating a blockade of the island, further escalating tensions in the region.
US President Donald Trump says Washington is holding talks with Cuba as the island grapples with US-imposed oil blockade. Trump calls Cuba a failed nation amid worsening fuel shortages and multiple airline suspensions.
Cuba is right now a failed nation. They don't even have jet fuel to get for airplanes to take off. They're clogging up their runway. We're talking to Cuba right now. I have Marco Rubio talking to Cuba right now, and they should absolutely make a deal because it's really a humanitarian threat.
The U.S. has reinstated its blockade of Cuba, declaring its intention to overthrow the republic's leftist government. Asked if he would consider a military operation like the one in Venezuela, Trump said he did not want to answer that question. Washington earlier warned it will punish any country providing oil to Cuba after Venezuela, once its main supplier, halted shipments following the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Mexico has also halted shipments following Trump's threat, raising fears of a deepening energy crisis on the island.
US President Donald Trump criticizes a newly signed clean energy agreement between the United Kingdom and California Governor Gavin Newsom just hours after the deal is finalized, according to Politico. The agreement commits both sides to closer cooperation on clean energy projects, including offshore wind, and aims to expand access for British companies to California's market.
Trump argued that it was inappropriate for Britain to engage directly with a Democratic state governor on such matters. He also accused Newsom of mismanaging California and pursuing environmental policies he described as damaging. In response, Newsom's office accused Trump of aligning himself with oil and coal interests. The UK government sought to ease tensions, saying it continues to work closely with Washington and that the California Agreement forms part of broader state-level partnerships, including arrangements with Florida and Texas. The dispute unfolds against a backdrop of wider strain. Trump recently invited proposals for offshore oil and gas leasing off California's coastline, a move strongly condemned by Newsom and environmental groups.
French President Emmanuel Macron begins a 3-day visit to India on Tuesday, with discussions focusing on cooperation in artificial intelligence and a potential multi-billion-dollar defense agreement. Central to the talks is India's plan to purchase up to 114 additional fighter jets in a deal estimated at $35 billion. Most of the aircraft will be manufactured in India. If finalized, the order will build on the 36 Dassault Rafale jets acquired in 2016, as well as 26 more ordered for the Indian Navy. During his fourth visit to India since 2017, Macron is scheduled to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi and attend an artificial intelligence summit in New Delhi. France has emerged as a key defense and economic partner for India, with bilateral trade standing at approximately $18 billion. Beyond defense and technology, the leaders are also expected to address global economic uncertainty and China's expanding influence in the region. Tariq Rahman is sworn in as Bangladesh's Prime Minister following a decisive victory in the general election. The leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party takes office after months of political turmoil, pledging to restore public confidence in government and rebuild national stability. Rahman and other politicians were sworn into parliament, becoming the first elected representatives since a deadly 2024 uprising that brought down Sheikh Hasina's government. He is set to take over from an interim government that has led the country of 170 million people for 18 months. 60-year-old Rahman led his party to a commanding win in the February 12 election, with the BNP coalition securing 212 seats in the 300-member legislature. The Jamaat-e-Islami-led alliance claimed 77 seats and has challenged the outcome in several constituencies, while affirming it will serve as an opposition. Israeli police announced plans to deploy large numbers of officers around Al-Aqsa Mosque during the holy month of Ramadan. Security is intensified in and around the compound, particularly for Friday prayers, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians traditionally gather at the site.
A senior Jerusalem police officer confirmed that thousands of officers will be on duty to manage crowds and maintain order. Palestinian officials, however, accuse Israel of imposing new restrictions at the East Jerusalem compound. The Palestinian Jerusalem Governorate says entry permits will be limited to men over the age of 55 and women over 50, reflecting measures introduced last year. It also alleges that Israeli authorities have prevented the Islamic Waqf, which administers the site, from carrying out routine Ramadan preparations and have barred dozens of its staff from entering the compound.
Hamas has accused Israel of a blatant violation of the agreed operating mechanisms for the Rafah crossing under the current ceasefire deal. In a statement, the group said Israel subjected Palestinians returning to Gaza to physical and psychological abuse and harsh interrogations despite the crossing reopening in both directions. Hamas also claimed Israel failed to respect daily travel quotas, putting thousands of patients seeking medical treatment abroad at risk. It urged mediators to intervene and compel Israel to open the crossing in accordance with international humanitarian law. Israel said about 320 patients and their escorts have left Gaza to Rafah over the past 2 weeks, with a similar number entering the enclave. The Rafah crossing had been mostly shut since Israeli forces seized it in May 2024 and resumed limited operations early February under the latest ceasefire agreement. That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Amirul Aiman. Thank you for watching and good night.